Good morning to you all out there. I'm going to try and get my way through a short live today. Been laid up with something, a disease for the last, look at that big bird boy, a disease for the last couple of days. Some would say ascension symptoms from the solar cycle. Some would say radiation poisoning from increased frequencies. Some would say the man flu. It's going to really annoy me, that little white hair there. All right, let's try and stay out of the light. But what I wanted to say mostly is welcome back. I've been out of action for about 4 days, and I don't usually get like that. So I imagine that there's some people out there that are suffering with that. So I'm going to have to do something about that. That is just annoying me, that great big white hair. What am I going to do about it? Maybe I don't look at myself. All right. Now I've drawn your attention to it. I'll colour it in. Is that better? Yeah, cool. Solved. Do it like with my hair. I might do that with a couple of greys up the back here. All right. Crazy and crazy times, and a lot of you can feel a lot of the energies coming out of the movement now. You can really feel it start to leach the last of your hope out, and that real desperation is coming in. We've talked about this for a couple of years now, basically where as we come into this last cycle, this sort of before the reset, whether it turns out to be financial, turns out to be spiritual, planetary, international, national, whatever it is, we all know and can feel that change is coming. Something is coming, and everybody's trying to steer the ship, or get the hold of the reins to get the best outcome for themselves on the other side. So you can take that information as something to be fearful of, which is what they love. The more fear and anger that's out there, great, that's good loose energy for them, but also the more irrational decisions that you will make. That's how fear and anger works, fight or flight up in here. And for the most part, for 5 years of the freedom movement, I have researched other people's work for 20 odd years. I've interpreted it 20, 30, 40 years. Some go back 50 years, but I've interpreted it on my whiteboard mostly as my daily download. You can't take this much information in. I see people out there all the time with 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 shared posts. That's what they're sharing. So unless they hit share on every single post that comes into the feed, they're just taking overwhelming amounts of information into themselves that they'll never remember. They'll never be able to recycle. They'll never be able to put it back out into the world. But they certainly will be able to remember the emotion that it made them feel. And the emotion that it makes you feel is locking into the signals that you're sending to your body. It doesn't have eyes, it doesn't have ears. It only has a receiving system of what is your emotion telling it. So if your eyes and your reactive part of your brain is telling your entire body, stress, fear, anger, stress, fear, anger, stress, scroll, stress, fear, anger, scroll, stress, fear, anger, share, comment, then your body's like, man, I don't know what's going on up there, but like they're telling everybody, I can feel that they're angry, that people are poisoning them. And they're like, yeah, we can feel that too. But then they keep sending down this McDonald's shit. So we're like confused, like who's poisoning us? And then they're like, get to the end of the weekend and then they drink a heap of alcohol and the body is like, what the fuck is going on? Hey, what's going on up there, guys? Like we can feel that you're stressed and angry about the world, trying to kill you with poisons, and yet you continue to eat and devour it and drink it yourself. Soft drink and alcohol and take away, crappy food, right? So the body is starting to really break down on a lot of people. And so once that happens, your ability to even discern information in this time that it's critical to be able to see the information and then discern it, filter it through a heart space, which is empathy, right? and then actually decide what you're going to put back out into the world through intent, intuition, and frequency vibration. That's the hardest thing. And so people continue to send me endless amounts of videos that, you know, for the most part are just rubbish. And they might be emotionally true. A man sent me a video today of the typical video you see these days. A random person that you may or may not know standing in front of some form of green screen like I do, but usually an AI document these days, just an AI created document with lots of fire, Fauci's face, you know, red colouring, you know, very, you know, ooh, oh, this must be important, you know, and that person is usually standing there saying, oh, what we've done is we've served a notice on the establishment, and the establishment will fall in days because of this paperwork that we've done. And I always just say, oh, cool, can you send me the link to the paperwork? And you don't get any answer from the actual profile that did it, right? Because they're way too busy with the work that they're doing. But you go in and follow their profile. I go around and I have a look to see if it actually leads you to a body of evidence that you can use, that we can use, right? And they're just put out there as distractions. They're put out there as hopium. They're put out there to confuse you. They're put out there in languages that overlap jurisdictions. So basically you end up with all of this knowledge, which is what I call fuel. Knowledge becomes the fuel that drives the action. Action actually gets you change from where you are to where you want to be. And so if you're trying to drive your car with action that comes from the fuel of knowledge, and everybody from every country and every jurisdiction and every language is pouring in there, you just get this cluttered car that doesn't go anywhere, right? And so if nothing else, what I've learnt on this path is to go as far right as I want and go as far extreme left as I want, gather that information and try and bring it back into some form of uniform embodiment of what we could actually do about it, me. And then I share that with you, because I change every time I grow with that information. Every time I change and grow that information, I might have a slight or subtle nuance in the way that I do, but you shouldn't see monstrous backflips on what I do, because only people that do that, the ones that fly in the air like a kite that changes direction every time the wind does, they're already, you know, they're tethered to somebody that's pulling the string, and they're operating out of, well, they're not doing research, right? They're not doing homework. They're not actually studying what we can do other than emotion to get out of this problem. So most of the freedom movement you'll see, you know, will either, the young fella, Kangaroo Jack, it's just an emotional diatribe that you listen to. Hundreds of thousands of people seem to listen to it. Just an emotional video of just like, everything in this country is fucked, but I know what we need to do. It's all fucked and everything's fucked. And I'm like, yeah, there's 1,000 people doing that at the moment. And I used to do that, right? And I still do it to some degree. Everybody has it. But I earned my stripes with the following that I got from taking the time to actually break down what it is that we're talking about. But you have to be able to listen to it, and then you have to be able to bring back a middle. I want to say to every single person out there in charge of a paperwork division, hear me. There has never been a time in history where the paperwork came before the people. The people coming together created a paperwork and therefore a pathway that gave them the revolution, the evolution, the new direction from where and when the people had had enough of whatever was going on. Be that tax, be that murder, be that war, be that corruption, be that overreach of power. So for every single body out there promoting paperwork as the answer for people to unite back under, you've got it the wrong way around. You're pushing the same hierarchical narrative as you've been trained to believe exists your entire life. The paperwork is an evidentiary body of a time in history where your forefathers, or just humans, came together and said collectively, we've had enough. And once the enemy was defeated, they then could sit down at the table and write the principles, the foundations, the lost power, the rights, the standards, the ethics, the morals, the codes. They could write that into what it was that they were doing for the future. So the problem always wasn't necessarily that the people didn't come together. The problem wasn't always necessarily that they weren't smart enough to understand the situation they were in. The problem was, for the most part, because of law, legal systems, hierarchical, top-down governance, for thousands of years, some clever person has been the person with the pen at that moment. Some, registered bar operative, some attorney, some fancy pants lawyer has been the person that has penned the wishes of the average person. And therefore, the simple changing of shall and should in a sentence can make a monstrous amount of difference to the outcome of it legally the day that you try and use that paperwork. Now, we've proven over and over and over again that the paperwork is worth nothing in the courts once they have determined the way that in which they wish the country to be steered. And our lack of people coming together has allowed that to continue to happen, because we are steered by two things in this popular politic world. It is our education, or lack of, and our media. So from birth, my education taught me a hierarchical system of what to think, not how to think. I was never taught constitution. I was never taught rights. I was taught right from wrong, and wrong was only defined by whether or not a policy officer would come and tell you, fine you, smack you, jail you. That is the definition of wrong. Let someone else define how far you can do something until there is a consequence for it. And the media, from get-go, was always there subtly inverting everything about society. Slowly but surely, more swearing, more sexualization, more naked people, more, innuendo, more children's cartoons now being chock-a-block full of perversion. Video clips. I watched a 20iAG1k1H3Q8Cd video clip maybe 15 years ago of Fergie's MILF mum, 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning on Video Hits or something like that on a Channel 10, where she was basically dry fucking anything that was on the land, that was around her, dry humping it while pouring milk over her tits with a leather suit on, and my children were singing the song at 13, 14, 15-year-old, and I realized it was the most shocking thing to actually see what had been played on the radio, what had been played on the CD player, whatever, back then. But to actually start to understand the level of indoctrination and training to subvert and therefore invert any form of moral, call it Christian if you need, but that's only a label for a type of belief, not necessarily an action strategy, right? It's about what you would accept in the street becoming on your TV and on your radio, through your music and that sort of stuff. So it's been going on for a very long time, and it is everywhere, and it will require a massive amount of change. But the thing that I noticed the most about the paperwork is that everybody needs you to believe in the paperwork that at some point in time the people collectively believed in. But I say that revolution is a fear-based reaction to a failure of action through your generational parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. So when we say we must go back to a document, it signifies that you're fearful that the lack of action from your parents and grandparents, they were too stupid in your mind to see what was happening to their country, and therefore you would expect that today's people are so much more clever than they were to be able to take your information and revert back to something that was back then. But it's not necessary, and it's actually quite defeating, because I've watched the freedom groups over and over scream at each other like they are at me currently about constitutional validity and the United Kingdom of Australia people telling me that we were granted this realm from Queen Victoria through letters patent. And I'm like, great, it's cool, I can read. I got it, I understand what it was, but I also understand that there's always elements that we don't get real insight and knowledge from, the fine nitty-gritty details of the day, of what the life was like for the average person like me and you, who potentially one day after the Constitution's installation, either A, did not give a rat's ass because they knew that the politicians were all a bunch of, toffee-talking wankers that were going to do whatever they wanted to do anyway, because that's what most of us say today, isn't it? Well, we don't give a fuck about politics and all their bullshit laws and acts and that sort of stuff until it really starts hitting us in the hip pocket. So there's no real difference from 1900 when we were talking about this shit, except for the fact that 1901 to maybe 1920, you would imagine that all those people were well and truly understood what a federation looked like what the Constitution's intent was, and what was possibly happening to it with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles as Australian independent nation, with the recognition of Australia independent sovereignty through the Balfour Declaration. Right, these were all things that were happening right in plain sight of the very Anzacs that they proclaim voted and partook in the foundation document of this country. But I believe that at no time in those historic moments, because people love to cherry pick each one of these little moments, like I've just done, 1919, 1926, they cherry pick the motive of their movement to tell you that this sequence of events can be changed by simply jumping back to where your grandparents or great-grandparents made those decisions to allow it to happen. And that's the part that has bothered me the most recently, where I've seen, let's move forward as a nation. No, let's go back and grab this ye old document and tear it forward with us. And I'm like, well, is it necessary? No, we cannot stop being a constitutional monarchy. And I'm like, okay, do you want to swear fealty to old sausage fingers? Well, no, we're talking about going back to Queen Victoria. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's okay, but she's dead, right? It's still going to need the people collectively that is this nation to come together and agree on something that fundamentally is being driven at the moment by two things. The nation's awake and aware at the moment of a problem with politics at the moment because of two things. The fear of the Bondi shooting, which is causing the cost of living immigration conversation to be weaponized against anybody that's brown, potentially. And that's it, because I've shown you the stats on that. Nobody really cared about it in October, November of 2025. Pauline Hanson was polling at 7, 8, 9%, a little bit up from the election that failed miserably at 6.5% primary. Well, all of a sudden we have the Bondi shooting, and then come January, she's 21% and continued to sort of hover around this 25, depending on which fucking mainstream media poll you want to watch. But that's almost directly relative to the amount of liberal people that have flushed out of there that are, terrified that brown people are going to shoot them on their beach. So it's a direct correlation, right? But at no time does anybody say, okay, we've learned our lesson from the failings of our common law system, or failing of our judicial system, failing of our constitution, which allowed all of this to happen. No point do we recognise that the people of this country were alive, active, aware voters. And I would hazard a guess that from 1910 to 1950, this country was fucking hyper aware of what was going on in politics and the news, because they didn't have fuck all else to do, especially in the middle of the depressions that came from those wars, right? Especially when the emotionally driven people traumatized to hell from the loss of fighting for other rich people's shit, right? And the best thing and the only thing that came out of World War I was that allegedly this paper trail, never ratified or solidified in Constitution, was our sovereignty, our independent nation status granted to us by the world by saying, you motherfuckers in Australia are hardcore black and white, Asian and African, Italian, Chinese, whoever was here, fought for this country, threw on the slouch hat and went to war on behalf of Australia. Not the 10% of white, mostly rich males who voted for that constitution less than 10 years before 1910. Yeah? Because the Indigenous weren't allowed to vote. The women, for the most part, didn't get a vote. The vote was only 10% of the voting of the actual population voted yes, 300,000. So it doesn't represent what today is anyway. And so the conversation needs to be had. Who are we? How do we move forward? And why did we get to where we are? Well, we got to where we are because of lack of knowledge. The internet is not helping with knowledge. I can guarantee you that. The average person out here watching this today has an absolute shit load of useless information running around in their head, basically feeding fight or flight, back and forth, basically leaving you in some tinderbox of a fueled fire or an unfueled fire of tinder waiting for the slightest match of a person to doubt you walking past, watching you erupt into, do your research, scream it, do you even know? You know, that emotional outcome that you have, which is just a reflection of a time when you were a child where somebody was, you know, rolling their eyes, a parent was dismissing you, or the teacher was not listening to you, or something along those lines. It's why we react as children when we're most triggered. But the point of it is, you don't know what you don't know, and you have spent 6 years being distracted, as I was for a few of those years. You have spent 6 years being distracted by things that mostly want to tell you to either stay exactly in the system as it is and continue to vote to see if you can get out of it, which has been done by your parents and your grandparents, and everybody that I know for the last 50 odd years has tried to get 1 and 2 off the top primaries, right? So you can do that. That's probably 80% of the disgruntled people in this country at the moment are saying, let's just vote our way out of it. The small population of freedom movements that don't believe in any voting and want to say no to the entire system, well, that's great, but, you know, we know that we're still using every of the privileges that move forward, right? The remedy groups, which is what I'm talking about with the paperwork, believe that we have to return to validating that paperwork. And I'm like, if, say, 1 million people tomorrow, if 1 million people tomorrow went and stood on the grounds of Parliament and said, we're not leaving until you recognise the 1900 version of the Constitution in this book here, and re-establish the Queen, re-establish subjects, you know, re-establish pound sterlings, everything like that, right? It still isn't the document itself providing that power. It is still the people. The misconception would be that the constitutionalists, who aren't really constitutionalists, Jackie Dundee and them, they're monarchists. Let's get that clear. Right? They are protecting the monarchy, not the constitution. If you were only protecting the constitution, then it wouldn't matter whether it was a republic or a monarchy, because you would have a very strong constitution. What they're protecting is the monarchy. So the monarchists would tell you, after that 1 million people had overthrown the power of the government and reinstated the power of that constitution, they would tell you that it was the document's power that won the day. And I'd be like, no, it was the people that won the day. The document was irrelevant. If 1 million people showed up with the Magna Carta and said, we're not leaving until you instill Section 61 of the Magna Carta for our lawful right to rebellion, Section 29 of the 1297 Magna Carta, right? The one that's listed, the one that's actually shown in Canberra. If we showed up, 1 million people showed up with the intent of one thing and not leave, or we're not segregated, or we're not divided like Epic eventually was, right? The outcome of whatever paperwork we presented would be that the paperwork might have historic value to be remembered, because individually each person of that million might not. But the coming together of those people is the power. That is the action that will drive the change. And whatever document comes out the outer side of it just represents the collective will of those people of that day. So the Constitution was given to you by politicians, lawyers, Quick and Garan, potentially Freemasons, because they were heavily infiltrated into everything that was Melbourne back in the day, before Melbourne became the ACT. They had just watched America write a constitutional republic into the existence of pushing the United Kingdom off their lands, kicking them out after the Civil War, and that Constitution and Bill of Rights was well and truly where they were like, we better write our own because these pricks might fucking do the same thing in Australia. But the difference between a pioneer and exploring American compared to a convict was the non-compliant convicts were dead. Because if they played up, ran away, put on a show, they were starved to death, beaten to death, shot to death, whatever it was. The compliant ones that shut the fuck up in their cell, did all the work of the colonialists, eventually were granted their freedom in some form. So anybody expecting some great rebellion from a prison island is thinking about it the wrong way. The only ones that survived those times are the ones that did exactly as their masters told them to do. So this is a heartfelt message to the people out there to say, I see your paperwork. I appreciate the work that you've done to identify the failings of your forefathers. But it is not a time to go backwards to it. It is a time to come forward together with it. As who? Okay, we can flush that shit out as we go. But if we don't start that national conversation with some sort of intent of what is the paperwork that the people say, actually, I'm in for that, then you have nothing. You have an opinion based on some evidence. You have a piece of paper that you don't have the body of people behind to force it, which is why it continues to fail. That's correct, isn't it? The Constitution continues to fail because when you go to the court, one to the Supreme Court or to the High Court, you have 1, 2, 5, 10 people, right? Allegedly 300,000 people that voted for it. When you go to the Magna Carta in days, when you talk about 1215 Magna Carta, well, they had an army. What did the Pope have? Well, Pope had bigger armies, I guess, because 10 weeks later he said no to the entire document. But somewhere along the line, the Lords and the King, and they came to an agreement and took out Section 61. Fuck that, they said. 10 weeks later, gone. 1216, the new version was written. Whether you like it or not, the army didn't come back and say, fuck you, Pope, Vatican and King. We fought for Section 61 to hold you people accountable. So the people didn't come back. Therefore, the document, forever and a day, did not have the one thing in it that they all claim makes us so powerful and lawfully able to rebel against them. Section 61. Do you understand the premise of the people are necessary to show the power of any fucking document you want out there? Like I said, if I had enough people behind me to march on Canberra, to march on wherever it is that you think you need to be part of the evolution of this country, to get it back on track, then I could simply write with a green crayon on a white piece of paper, fuck you, GovCorp, get fucking out. From today, people are in charge. And 1 million people would hold it up. And one day your great-great-grandchildren will be saying, remember today where we swear loyalty and fealty to the fabulous, powerful document. The powerful words of fuck you, GovCorp. Because the words won't matter. In the future, the words won't matter. The document is simply a rendition of that day, those people, and the will and sentiment of the ones that came together to put it in place. Now, the lawyers got a free shot on us with the Constitution. There was no civil uprising, there was no rocks thrown. They knew what they had to do, particularly after things like the Eureka Stockade. They could see what was happening with the taxes. They could see what was happening with the Tea Party stuff, right? They could see that Australia could potentially be influenced the same way as the Americas were, and they could see that they were losing their grip. Also, we could see that the Crown, through all of the wars that it had back and forth with America and France and all of these different things, had bankrupted itself to a fair degree, and all of these subdivisions that they had out were costing them a shit ton of money. Okay, so they were potentially setting themselves up for asset subdivision, which was what we saw for the next 20 or 30 years after that war. But they pushed that debt onto us and then said, yay! It's equivalent of saying, children, we love you, you're now 18, you've lived in a house for so long, you're independent, we love you, and, now you're free to go out, take that donga that we've got, you can put it on any land you want, or take that $100,000 caravan and move it to wherever you want, we love you, it's yours. Also, you've got to take the $40,000 debt with you, because that's the equivalent of what they said. They needed to shift the debt, shift the blame, and it happened. Now, I believe that there is things playing out in this country that is equal to a lot of what they say. The way that we define a lot of things in this country is really weird. And I'm going to try and give you a little rendition here. But in the Black's Law dictionaries or in the normal dictionaries, when you define person, it will say something along this line of a human being dot. So it'll be like one, and then it'll be like sorry, I'm writing backwards. Yeah. Human being, and it will be a corporation. Corporation. Two. So most of your definitions you'll find is very clear that they accept that a corporation is a person. Okay. Now, because these entities created on paper become a body that acts transactionally on commerce on behalf of a person, but almost as a shield for the person. But in the law books, you will find a person is easily defined as a human being or a corporation. In the Australia Acts Interpretation Acts, it defines a person as it is a body corporate. I think this is the way that it's written. I'm a bit crusty today. Body corporate a corporate as well as an individual. Right, that right? So in our Acts Interpretation Act, the definition of person in our Acts Interpretation Act in Australia is a body corporate, a corporate as well as an individual. Now, up here, you got a choice, one or two. And we're not going to get into living man, living woman yet. We're not going to get into the hue of man being a lighter shade of man. Right? We're not going to get into the depth that some people do to validate this conversation. This is simple. This is simple for me to be able to give you a conversation to ask questions. Basic grammar would not have that written like that in a lawful definition of the people of this country. That is simple. You are either that one or that one. In this country, you are that one, as well as that one. As well as, right? No, I didn't write as well, an individual. As well as, I'm saying as well as like a moron. I didn't even write as well as an individual. Please fact check me, because this is the work that you need to do. And these are the small pieces that you can take away with you to ask questions. It's a minor. It's an error. It's a slip, right? Is it? Or is it the first pathway to incorporation? Never done a backwards question mark before. Pretty clever. Is it the first pathway to incorporation? Because everybody says that Australia is a company. And everybody says that you are a dead entity. Now, dead entity is just either body corporate. Sorry, I'm just reading my own backwards writing. Corporate, even though that's not any better. Okay, so the story that people tell you out there is that you are a dead entity. The straw man is the dead version of you in the capitalized version of itself. And I look at the evidence and I go, I can get it. I can understand what they're trying to say. Because most of the systems they have out there, if you actually look at them and go, okay, makes sense, that it's probably relative and probably fair. Like we need that in some level to be able to transact trade internationally. Okay, no worries. But by doing this, it's easy to say which one you are. And it's also easy to define which jurisdiction you are. Land-based law, corporate maritime system. That's the way that I would interpret it, right? Law of maritime, law of the sea, right? Land law. In here, in Australia's Act, body corporate, a corporate as well as an individual, right? So, am I spelling incorporation right, or just my head not working right? As well as an individual. So, as well as, in bracket, is a conjunction. So, a conjunction is simply taking two things that are separate and incorporating them into one thing. That's what a conjunction does. And so if I had a menu that says I can choose, I have on offer tonight chicken, steak, as well as chips, I would have to say that the chips come with the steak. I know that they're two different things, but the steak as well as chips is part of them together. Now I can ask for them to be separated. I could ask for it to come on its own. Or I could choose the chicken, which is up the top with no conjunction, no tie. But unfortunately, when we're choosing what we are a corporate as well as an individual, which is incorporation. Otherwise, lawfully, why not just have exactly as the law dictionaries have? The defined jurisdiction separated by dot point and by numbers or by category. Not corporate as well as an individual, which uses a conjunction, look up as well as and ask it what it means. Ask Google what as well as means in between two words. So it incorporates two things into one. So on your birth registration, right, you're seeing something there. Now, not a birth certificate, two different documents, right? Birth registration then issues the certificate. Birth registration issues the certificate. So if you have gold registration, you were issued the paper money that was backed by the gold, or you were issued the certificate to say that you have gold in a vault. I have certificates to say that I have gold in the ANZ bullion vault. Now, basically, what can I do with that gold? With that certificate? Not much. I could probably sell that certificate, but it's not the kind of certificate that I can trade down. Right? Simon King, can't we just write it in a Bible? Extrapolate, push that conversation out for me, mate, so I just understand. We'll get to the Bible stuff later. So, at birth, you are born a human. At birth you were born a human. So somewhere in here you are born. And you are told, the mother is told, mum is told that she has to register the birth. Yeah? That you have to register the birth. Now, what is Regis? What is register? Register is potentially giving the right of that away, because anything that you register can be taken off you. You register your car, don't follow their rules, they'll take your car off you. You register your gun, don't follow their rules, they'll take the gun off you. You register your child, don't look after your child and send them to school like they do. Order the state, they'll take your child off you. You are, at that point, you are registering your child into their system. And so these things start appearing as what we would call people would believe that it turns the baby into value for the state, for the nation, right? Because we have been registered to say there's one more tax-paying slave that is about to grow up in this country. It will have costs involved as it grows, so we need to nurture it and train it, right? We need to make sure it stays healthy. We need to make sure that it is educated in our way, so that when it comes due to be able to financially help this country through its tax burden, given permission to exist by the registration into the corporation side of it, because we incorporate with that birth registration that gives us a certificate, the lowercase name given to me by my mum with the uppercase name that indicates that you are now willing on that document to take your corporate and your individual, as well as incorporate them into the new entity, right? The new entity that is put in here, and then you become what they call the creditor and the debtor. Now, this is all pseudo-law. This is all an explanation of what I've learned with all of these little inconsistencies that you find along the way. And where's that coming from? I'll just move it over. Nope. What about that way? No. Where's that sucker coming from? Oh, sorry. I'm going to work out where that light is coming from. Whatever. I'll work it out. So the purpose is, because everybody says Australia is a company. Well, Australia has done something similar. Shit, I forgot. I drew Australia the right way around. Sorry. You ever try to draw Australia at all and then try to draw it backwards? Is it better? Yeah, kind of looks like Australia. Western Australia probably needs to work on its booty. It's getting a bit of a big ass on it. But Australia, the land, or Terra Australis, as some want to call it, became the paperwork, the company. So most people are becoming aware of the company that is the Commonwealth of Australia Proprietary Limited. Most people have seen that the grammar that they use in capital language is not true lawful grammar. Most people are starting to realise that this company in the capital letters is something different to the Commonwealth of Australia in lowercase letters. Most people can start to see that now. You've had 6 years to catch up since COVID, and that's why I say most of the information out there is overwhelmingly difficult to decipher and actually do something with, right? That's annoying me. I think it goes down like that. So this, for the most people that are watching this, is just going to go more useless shit for you. Okay? What I'm saying to you is, somewhere along the line, something happened where they started trading you against your dollar. Okay? They no longer had gold backing their dollar. And so internationally, they had to say, what are we going to do to prove internationally that our dollar is still valuable when we print it? Because that's what they've been doing for a long time, printing the dollars, right? What are they going to do? What are we going to show? Well, we have to show that the person who was born, these are all maritime systems, right? Because they're all maritime words. You are birthing, right? The mother is the ship, the baby is the cargo. You don't register a person who steps off the ship onto land. You register cargo at the dock. So when the vessel comes through the birth canal, right, the birthing canal, it is registered at the dock. It is maritime system for commercial trading around the world. They had to do it to show that when they took the gold off the back of that dollar, that they were... give me a second. We'll be right back. There's just a small discrepancy in my broadcasting... just a small discrepancy in my broadcasting office of many, many things. Simon said abandoned goods. Right, well, that's what they would be considered, right? It comes out of the 1666 CyKwqbDcE86cvXRqJMuKmh Act, but where the Great Fire of London burned all the records and they considered everybody lost at sea. It was a follow-on from something simple. It was all sort of sequential from the 1215 Magna Carta of the rights of the lords and the noblemen while they were away fighting the wars. Right? The 1297 version came about just in time before the 1302 Unum Sanctum came about from the Vatican. Right? They were always saying, we will look after your soul, your heart, your property in trust, just in case you remain lost at sea, just in case you never came back to claim what was rightfully yours. And so that paper system is putting them into the registration, certifying who is in charge of them, of the trusteeship of the money that they will create off the back of their sweat in the future, for the benefit or the privilege of certifying that they are part of the system, part of the incorporated system, by taking the name given to them and incorporating that into this creditor relationship. Franco Collins is Ucadia, massive read, mostly canon law, another one of the many fundamental things out there, people working with a handful of people for a long time. Won't work, can't work, because it doesn't have the people. Sorry, 100 plus hours of listening to it. True, right, sure, is, was, done, but nobody's going to listen to it. And that, therefore, we have to continue to, people like you, if you've read it, put it into an actual working practice, and we will start the conversation of how we move forward with the day with that information, and he can sit at that table, right? But this is just a simple little pathway of questions that need to be asked, but can also be answered reasonably easy when you say, we have a fiat currency. We don't have anything backing our money. So should there be, as Pete and Donna from the Corruption Whistleblower, they went and paid for a quantity surveyor to say, what are the assets of this country? Trillions of dollars worth of assets of the country. That should be our backer for our dollar. That's what this country's value is, right? Should not be our people. Our people should not be tethered to the back of that. Because every time you print more money, you devalue your people. Your people's work that pays the tax, every time we print money, you devalue the work of the people. We have to do more of it to get the same amount of money. Or more of it to have our money buy the same thing that it used to. That is the devaluation you don't see. Your dollars go up. I used to earn $3,000 when I was $3,000 a year in the 80s. Now I earn $80,000 a year. $3,000 years in the 80s would have bought you a kilo of gold, a block of land, okay, maybe, block of land, maybe the 70s, 80s, block of land, kilo of gold. $80,000 today will buy you about a third of a kilo of gold and about a quarter of the average land price in the country. Sounds like you've had an impressive pay rise, but your dollar has been devalued by the printing of debt in your name against your work, your sweat equity here. And you, the capitalized version of your name, continue to show up and pay the bills of this commercial maritime system. Australia still exists as land. They call it terra nullius because they want to try and separate Australia as you know it, as the name, from their corporation that is trading on behalf of us as the Commonwealth of Australia Proprietary Limited. But they can explain away all of this stuff with simple flicks of the hands. Oh, that's not what it means. It means individual. Well, why doesn't it say that? And they're like, you know what you are. You're an individual or you're a corporate. The judges will be like, whatever. It's a grammatical error at best. It's not. It's deliberate. It's deliberate to continue to slowly have you step in, because the only thing required for all of this to exist is free will. Now, all given it that free will is at gunpoint, like we say all the time. People are like, no gunpoint. And I'm like, it is. You've just birthed a baby in a hospital, and you are being told right there and then to sign your baby into registration, or they will not be able to have medical, they will not be able to have Medicare, they will not be able to attend school, you will not be able to get back family tax benefits, you will not be able to have this and this and that. That's gunpoint. That's coercion. Because if you don't, and you walk out of there, they will tell you there is massive consequences. So in one of the most traumatic times in a woman's life, giving birth to a baby, they are right there and then forced into this situation. Now, there's plenty of conversations that I've seen go much deeper than this, that the second one is the, what do you call it, the placenta. All right, and so the placenta and baby, these are the lots of conversations that when you really get down into it, that the placenta is one entity, the placenta is one entity and the baby is another entity, right? And those two incorporations. I don't need you to go there. Guys, did I say coercion or coercion? Coercion. Sorry, did I say coercion? I do it a lot. Coercion. So all of these things, they just need you to agree to partake. Now, I can tell you now that there's 15 million people in this country that if I could take this out of my mind and submit it into their mind to say, you are actually representing a corporate version of yourself, right? You're actually always showing up on behalf of that trust here. You are showing up and always paying all the debts of that corporate version of yourself, right, as a living man or woman, you go to work on behalf of that trust, but when you get there, you show them your tax identification number. You're there, they are a company that you're going to work for, and you need to be a company to work for them. They need to pay your company. The company pays the tax, and you, the living man or woman, gets paid a wage from your company. What's left over? The company pays the tax. Income tax, they say, is voluntary. Well, income is something that a company has. A wage is something that a person has. Your company, your ATO, your capitalised version of your name, because now remember, once you've incorporated yourself, everything you receive comes in non-legal capital text. That's not the true grammatical standing of the paperwork. It is a representation of the corporate fiction that is Jody Lowe, the incorporated corporate individual who was incorporated through the registration process, giving a certificate to say that I am bonded through the grantee relationship that my mum, grantor, put me into trust, right, so that I could have the benefit, right? I would be a beneficiary. I would be a beneficiary of Australia, the Commonwealth of Australia Proprietary Limited, the operating functional company arm of the landmass of Australia. That's the way that it's set up. I benefit from the hospitals, the roads, the schools, the Medicare system, the socialist type stuff. I am a beneficiary because my mum registered me as an asset to the Australian corporation, because my tax debt slavery through this corporate name will eventually fund the backing of the dollar of this country so they can continue to print it and be prosperous. It's why the country's numbers continually need to grow, because we're printing money, devaluing what each of these people, these babies' value is worth. Like I said, a block of land, you used to have to work 1 year to be equal to the block of land. Now you have to work 3 years to be equal to the block of land, as I just showed you before. So that means, technically, to keep up with the money printing, I need 3 babies. We haven't rebirthed ourselves for over 50 years as a nation. We haven't hit our 2.1 rebirth rate for 50 years. We have grown since 1970 to 2020, just a rough 50-year figure, purely on immigration. 13 odd million to 26 plus million in that time frame. Nearly 100% of it is immigration. Because we have to continue to have people put into citizenship, right? Citizenship, and issued formal paperwork that subverts this relationship through birth. It's not enough. Not enough of us, not enough people backing the money. We need other people to come in and take up national citizenship, right? No more subjects after 1948, right? Well, subjects that were before that, but everyone born after 1948, 26th of January 1948, National Citizens Act, became a citizen. A citizen is a member of a republic. A republic is the body politic, the collective of people who came together under a political association for the purposes of trade, debt collection, governance, okay? The subject is loyal to a crown. The crown is a monarchy anymore, but this system still underlies under all of it. It is in plain sight to some degree, trading you off, and without your knowledge, they are using you as the debtor for what should be a bill struck against the Commonwealth. Tell me if I've got my sound back. So what they're doing is they are administering you. They are administering you out into the Vatican's Holy See, the maritime law of the sea, the commercial UCC world, right? They have turned you into the asset that backs the dollar, right? Now, there's a lot of nuances, and there's a lot of little rabbit holes, and there's a lot of spear-offs, and there's a lot of people who want to say, go back to being a subject of the crown and that sort of stuff. This system, this birth registration system, existed right back. Okay, the birth certificate itself was way before 1900. Right? I'll talk to that in a minute, Sean, about government reliance on payments and stuff like that. That's what this system is for, right? The system is to entrench you into this system here. To not understand that your wage is technically not taxed, is it? If you believe you're a company, if you showed up and identified yourself as the incorporation, Jody Lowe in the capital letter, with my corporate number, my ATO number, my tax file number, right? My tax file number and my personal name is all in capitals. That's my incorporated vehicle that I will use to trade with these people. That's why we used to pay cash to people back in the day. Now we pay through electronic transfers through the ATO's tax file identification number. Some say the tin man tax identification number, TIN, right? And then the pay is who shows up. Well, not this guy. He doesn't show up to work. I do. The living man shows up to work. It's my blood, sweat, equity, time that shows up and does the work. Now, the two corporations, the one that I work for, right? Sorry, I did it like this. The one that I work for is a corporation, right? The one that is me, the corporation that I identified myself, they transact for an agreed amount. They have a contract. The money is exchanged because the corporation, under the Corporations Act and the Taxation Act, has an obligation to remove the income tax from said corporation, right? And then the remainder goes to, I guess, the living man. Now that would be an okay situation if we understood this part. Because as trustee, your benefit of the road would mean that any sale of an asset, any money that is coming from the land mass of Terra Australis or Australia, the profit of that would be equally shared into the trust or consolidated fund, revenue fund, the sovereign fund, what they call it around the world, or the individual set of K-Trust, which some people believe is individually out there. I found myself, that name, trading with a, what's the number? What do they call it? A QSIP number. I found my name in that trust trading with a QSIP number on the American Stock Exchange because you can track it. And I did. I found it. But the proportion of that with multiple names in there and $10 million in trading, it is potentially all mine, some of mine. It's not worth it, right? Because I don't control it, because I don't own that name. Because my mum gave them permission to have me as the asset that they can do whatever they need to do with, as long as I benefit from them managing that asset. Does that make sense? It's the permissionary note that your mum has given permission here to register into their company, into the corporate version of themselves, right? Your mum registered your birth, right, to the dock, maritime law, the birth to the dock, right, the banks of the sea, right, banks of the sea, banks of the river, right, right, and that certificate is basically your promissory note to say you are entitled to any benefit of the Commonwealth of Australia Proprietary Limited. Everywhere you go when you're a kid, until you can get your own identification, your mum uses that certificate to say, my child, right, who is under the protection of the trustee of the Commonwealth of Australia asset system here, right, that's living, that's dead. The trustee is the Commonwealth in between, and it is supposed to be providing you the benefit of registering the asset, which is you in the future earning tax slave debt and feeding it back into the corporate world. So you use that certificate for a long time as you move forward to identify yourself. All right? You are using that certificate to identify your right to the benefits. So when you go to get a Medicare card, identify yourself with a certificate that I can benefit from the Medicare system. Identify yourself when you go to the doctor, so I can benefit from the health system. Eventually identify yourself when you go to school, so I can benefit from the school system. It's not a bad system, but the problem with the trustee is the trustee now knows, and has for a very long time, that you don't know who you are. The trustee's job should be, in my opinion, and the way the trusteeships would work, would be that somebody, either your mum, while you were incompetent at law, all right, and you were too young, they call it, I can't remember the word that they use. It's maturity, right? Immaturity, right? You are too immature to make the decisions on your own, but she's appointed them as trustee by giving them the registration command. They look after all of the government's, the country's money, right? Now, it might not look exactly like this, but most people understand trust and companies. It's an easy way to say it, right? Simon said, when you turn 18, you can claim your life back, apparently. Yes, as long as the trustee can't show that you're an imbecile or incompetent in the eyes of the law. A 16-year-old kid who's been granted beneficial status for property put into trust for him, assets put into trust when the father passed or the parents passed, right? A 16-year-old cannot come back to $1 billion fortune and say, I'm ready to be in charge of the money, because they would have to prove their competence of who they are and what they do and how they'll live and how they'll act. They have to prove competence to the trustee. It's the trustee's job, because you show up never knowing who you are. You show up with this dead entity's name. You keep getting bills from the trustee, and you, the living man, pay it with your net money, your wage. Oh, yeah, I'll pay that, because you continue to act as surety. Well, that fund can continue to grow exponentially, doesn't it? And because you never actually go back and claim what is yours in here, a death certificate is the final thing that closes out the trust agreement. The living birth certificate, therefore the registration. So the living birth certificate initiates a registration of the birth as an asset into trust, granted by the mum to act as trustee, the state, for you, the beneficiary of this country's corporate world, right? The asset, the land, the living is here, extracted, used, utilised, sold corporately around the world, internally around the world, whatever it is, right? And that finance should be there, should be coming through to you. Now, the issuance of a statement, an invoice, is an offer to contract. The offer to contract comes to this person. Jody Lowe gets that offer to contract, but this moron pays it. Because the way the system is supposed to work is, if I'm acting on behalf as the living man of my corporate entity, then I would simply say to the trustee, yes. Yes, you can pay that bill for the rates out of my trust. My Commonwealth, consolidated, sovereign fund, whatever you want to call it. My Set of K trust, my Commonwealth trust, my sovereign fund, my consolidated revenue fund this is where the money should be paid for things like power. Because my land, and don't get me started with the Indigenous stuff, people that are Indigenous that watch me, you understand what we're saying, what I'm saying here, or my share of the land that I was born on, right, has thermal coal. My thermal coal is being pulled out of the ground. It has been commercially monetized into a way that we can trade around the world on land and off land. The benefit or the income that is received from that is put into here, a share of it. And when the electricity bill, which is another company and another company doing a transaction, send me an invoice, an offer to contract, I should simply be able to say, yes. I might want to question why our power has gone up 3 times and what sort of job they're doing, or I might want to say, why am I coerced into doing business with XyKwqbDcE86cvXRqJMuKmh, a state-owned company that is my only choice at the power pole out here? How is that a fair and equitable contract under the principles of contract law? It's not. And if I don't pay my power bill, they say, which I've tried to pay with a bill of exchange, utilise this sort of process, and they're like, that is not a recommended payment in our contract we have with you, Mr. Lowe. And I'm like, interesting, we want to talk fair contracts. Tell me where it was that we struck this contract under equitable agreement between me and you, and tell me where my choice is for other providers for this area. Tell me why the council has put a caveat on me to say that I can't subdivide my land and have solar-powered batteries with diesel generators for each of the houses I want up here. I have to plug all of them back into your network of ergon under a coercive natured contract that has no fair equitable outcome for both people. You win. Sorry for the rant. But do you understand how this can work? Right? It can work if we get that this is a complex world. It is very hard to trade. The whole point of putting your gold in Fort Knox in the first place was because it stopped mums and dads having to ride down to the store with their bag of gold, right, and getting robbed at that point. I have to go to the bank and you would have to identify yourself with autograph, signature, whichever the dead or the living is. You'll work that out as you go. But you would put your gold into the bank where they would have higher security, they would have guns, they would have timers, locks, all of the things. Right? You put it in there and they would give you the paper, the piece of paper that you could trade with that. Now, should you say that you were robbed of your paper, right? That paper would be numbered and potentially null and voided. That paper is no good because a robber got it. You would go back to the bank and you could be reissued. I would imagine there'd be some hoops to jump through. But the intent was right. It stopped the morons robbing you of your gold. People used to get the gold coin and they would heat it and take little pieces off it. They would have the true form of deflation, which was your gold coins were getting smaller and smaller. So people were robbing it. People were robbing the size of the coin until the coin was too small or too thin to actually be true value. So we had to weigh it and stamp it. I mean, just as many evil people have caused the system to happen as the actual people that are in charge that are now supposedly the evil ones that make all of it evil. You can say we can go back to common law, Magna Carta, Constitution. You can say we go back to pound sterling and all of that stuff. At some level, they are all some sort of fiat, funny money currency that comes about through convenience first, making life easier for you, taking risk away, and then compliance is the secondary function of it. A person in the Bible, someone was talking about it before, God has no respect for persons. And in Jesus' name, Christ's name, Christian name, right, will you find salvation. This is Vatican maritime corporate law. This is them spreading themselves across the world and influencing systems from the get-go, from 1,000 years ago, to trade commercially across all of the nations that they were colonising under the things like the doctrine of discovery that allowed Cook to come here and claim terra nullius fraudulently over the land mass of Australia, which was populated, but not in a Christian or Catholic sense that was defined in that doctrine. It's been here for a very long time. It works if some simple things are changed to make sure that this system, this relationship, is actually benefiting you by the use of your sweat equities labour, by the sale of that which you were given dominion to under the Bible, which underpins the Constitution through Queen Victoria's Act of Settlement 1701 into her letters patent for heirs and successors as subjects of the crown, the realm, right? Genesis 1:28. Whatever you want to say, you were born here, so you have an equal share to the right. You have an equal share in the work that's needed to make this country great. You don't do your part in terms of go to work. You just go to work, pay your tax, and you come home for the most part, right? What more can my country do for me is a question we ask at every election, rather than what more can I do for my country. Learning, actioning it, and being the change you want to see is what we can do for this country. This system is what is in place. It cannot continue because we don't know who we are. We continue to show up as fools, imbeciles in the eyes of the law, in front of the court to say we are ready to take control of our trusteeship. But we do it by signing in as the dead entity, not even knowing who we are. We do it by giving our certificates of dead incorporation to them to show that that's who we are, while saying we are living. Yes, we can see you are living, but you are acting in a jurisdiction of a corporate. You are acting as a corporation because an incorporation is how you are trading yourself through the system, and you continue to pay as a surety for the debts struck in this system. I hope that is the easiest way you'll ever understand what we're talking about when we say that Australia is a company. Yes, it has a company-facing arm, the same as you do. There is a living soul landmass that is sunken, submerged under the floating world of maritime law. When we say step off the citizenship and put your feet back on land, for the most part, it requires you to hand back all of the certified agreements, all of the benefits of the system, because you want to start here and not be filtered, your benefit be filtered through this. People are saying, at the moment, I'm getting shit on through this filtration system because they spend on your debt of this country, and you get a small portion of socialist payment of your money back. And they don't teach you about bills of exchange and stuff like that. So the living man or woman still pay every bill that shows up on their behalf, whether they like it or not. So most people are trying to find paperwork pathways that put them back onto land, and so they can rebut the bills that come from this company, the invoices that are sent to the living man or woman in the name of the corporate entity that should be able to be just ticked or autographed by the living, just an autograph, thumbprint, to prove that I am the living man and that my unique thumbprint is my signature to you, my autograph to the system, that I, acting on behalf of my dead entity, know who I am. I understand that they have to have a corporate arm. Dead can deal with dead, living can only deal with living. And while ever we are under a corporate maritime system of world trade, that this might be necessary to interact and trade into the world, as long as I am told very, very clearly what I have to do to operate as the living man who makes the decisions once I become of age to take control of my share of the living land mass of this country. How will we do that? You won't. You won't. Unless, Romley Stewart did this 10 years ago. This is Romley Stewart's information for the most part. This is my just interpretation. Romley would watch this and go, you're wrong here. Wrong here. I like the way you framed it, but this is more about this. Constitutionalists would be like, that's not the truth. It's only your subject. Everybody would have their own little interpretations of it. This is me. This is my reading of all of their work. This is my research and fundamentally funneling it through. What does it mean to me to be a living man in this country? Well, it means to me that I want to have more control over the financial interests, financial burdens, and the financial assets of the land mass that the protector of this country, that's what I consider myself to be. I am blessed. I am fortunate. I am proud to be lucky enough to be born on this land. It is not a gift to me that I take lightly, because some people are born into the Middle East, and why wouldn't you want to spend your fucking days shooting your way out of there and going to countries like ours when you happen to be born in that motherfucking country, that motherfucking place, right? But until you've been to our place, you wouldn't know any different anyway. This place needs protecting because we were lucky. I show great gratitude every day that I can wake up and not see a bomb falling out of the sky, not see an earthquake shaking the place to pieces, not see a volcano running down the lava down the sides of the hill, not see a monstrous seaborne tsunami coming over the top of our defended reefs. All of those things. Not see warlords in flogged out Toyotas with machine guns on the back of them coming in to rape, kill the people in my village. Not see foreigners coming in, to mine our gold and our coal and that's probably happening. But, not see the things that we see in every other country in the world. Ukrainian war, the Gazan war, the Iranian war, the Syrian war. All of these things going on simultaneously while we're sitting here whinging about the fact that, no, I'm not the dead entity. This is a fucking country fucked. This is not fair. Our country's so fucked. I should get more money back out of my taxes. And I'm like, yeah, sure. It is a little bit difficult sometimes, and it is going in the wrong direction. You and me need to find the answer and fix it collectively. And we're back to the start of that conversation. No time in history has the paperwork been the definitive thing that has closed it out for the people. The people coming together have collectively won the day, and once they've won and once they've got control, they write the paperwork. Unfortunately, most of the people who were in power simply say, I'm with you guys. As the power of the people shift, the Pauline Hansons of the world, they see the uprising. They see what you're upset about with the Liberals and the Labor Party. They exist to offer an option that just in case the people actually come together long enough to overthrow the political establishment that caused this system and allows it to exist in plain sight every day, just in case, hey, we'll be with you when you win and we'll help you be represented and write the new documents of what that will look like. And I promise you that that is not the case, because if they aren't able to show the deception that we've been talking about, and for example the Rhone Initiative that I'm going to propose you read at the end of this, then nothing will change. Now the Rhone Initiative doesn't really go much into this, right? The Rhone Initiative is still a floating system inside their system, but I've established that as much as I can put every bit of time and effort as I have in the last 2 or 3 years into these remedy groups, that they are so niche, so much finesse, they are so fraught with danger that I cannot honestly say that I want to pretend to continue to say that I'm going to be able to educate 1 million people how to do it, because I can barely do it. I can recite it, but am I going to travel to the shops with my daughter in my car with no registration and no license? Am I going to do that, just going to get my milk, so that I can stand my ground under Section 92 of my Constitution's federal right to travel as a federal member of this country? No. I'm not going to do that, because I'm not going to have to try and educate every single copper that pulls me over on the side of the road and drags me out of the car like a Nazi papers, please thing, because this is administration. This is military administration in the way that they administer you. You are pulled over for spot checks for your paperwork. Papers, please! And if you don't have your paperwork, to identify yourself as one of the consenting company employees, participants, agreements, administered people, then you will be considered an enemy, a belligerent, and you will be treated as such until you yield, bend the knee, or say, I'm sorry, I will partake again because I was benefiting from driving on the road. Right? No, you were driving, which is not commerce, which means you don't need a license, you don't need registration. That's the way it was written. That's the way it was always written. You've already paid for it. You paid for it. It's your land. You were born here. Right? You paid for it with tax. You paid for it with rego. You paid for it with GST. You paid for stamp duty. You paid for it. And then they've got $1.5 trillion worth of debt in your name. Someone wrote earlier. Over $40,000 each for every single person in your household has now unofficially signed up for another $40,000 worth of debt that will have to be paid with your tax. The government has no money. No money. It's your money. That's it. If it isn't your money from selling your land, your assets, your resources, it's your tax. They don't have any money. Whenever they say, we've just opened 10 more free dentists, what they mean is, we just paid for 10 more dentists with your money or your country. They don't have money. They're just the bank. A bank that takes in your money and then through fractional reserve lending lends it out for profit. The profit for them is power. The profit for the bank is more money. This system is easily shown to be a corporate maritime system where we don't know who we are. We continue to pay the bills on behalf of the asset that should be getting most of those bills paid for. If you individually take your license and agree to contracts with Netflix, agree to things that are outside the beneficial scope of what the country should provide to people, which is basic water, roads, schooling, hospital, education, right? If it falls outside of the scope of that, then no, I don't think that the living man and the corporate entity should be able to write bills of exchange for luxuries such as Netflix. You make that choice. But the only choice you've got is to identify you in the corporate world with that person. And so when the invoice comes to them, yes, you technically, the living person, signed up for that Netflix contract, signed up for that phone contract, you pay the frickin' thing. That's a luxury. It's not a benefit. It's not a privilege. Well, it is a privilege, but it's a privilege that you should do that other people don't. Make sense? Absolutely not. Rome. Right. Everybody says at the end of these things, everybody watches these things, right? Simon said, in the courts of military tribunals. Yes, they are. The military. Mr. doesn't exist. Mr. is a low-ranking military title. It doesn't exist. In the Black's Law Dictionary, Mr., the closest thing to Mr. is a misery. There's no such title as Mr. No MR, no MISTR. It's a military rank, not a legal title. And they attach those sorts of things to you because it's a military situation. like I said, you're thrown into jail until you identify yourself, until you say that you are who they say you are, which means that you have signed an agreement from the living man somewhere along the line. And if you don't find your way back to land to prove that you actually know who you are in the system, then you are incompetent in the eyes of the trustee, and they're doing their job technically by not letting you be in charge. It's a long way to learn, and it's a lot of things that have got to happen to do that. And I will continue to do that while I operate as this person inside the system, working my way back to be able to navigate both parts of this, because I believe that we should be benefiting from the system itself. But I also believe that we need to have the choice rightfully where and when we contract, so that coercion isn't the thing that makes the decisions for us. Inside of the Roan Initiative, we're talking legislative reform. Is that constitutional reform? Yeah, it can be. Because the only way to have constitutional reform at the moment is say that the Constitution had that many holes in the bloody thing that we ended up where we are today. Or the Constitution wasn't actually loved by the nation as they said it was, and we allowed our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, or great-grandmothers and great-grandmothers, allowed the slide through statute away from the power of the Constitution, because we were excited to be an independent sovereign nation, as written in the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, as written in the 1926 Balfour Declaration, as accepted in the 1942 Statute of Westminster Adoption Act, as taken on board by all of the subjects in 1948 for the National Citizens Act change, as agreed upon with the 1953 change of the rule, styles and titles, removing subjects and installing the Queen, as in the 1973 change of the rule, styles and titles Act, where she took subject out completely and only citizens exist, that's the Republic, changing of the 1984 letters patents, which became the Queen of Australia, the fraudulent Queen without constitutional. We'd already had the change of the currency, which was not correct. That was the Republic as well. Changing of the seal, changing of the the unlawful writs and the power taken away from the Governor General in the 1986 Australia Act. All of those things, removing the Privy Council from having any right or petition of right that comes out of your 1689 Bill of Rights through English common law, that was the foundational principle, into the back end of our Constitution before the interpretation of our court's legal system becomes Australian common law. Right? We've had over 125 years of interpretation through our courts of our law system. That is our common law, not theirs anymore. Simon said, so are we under the King of Australia currently? In the corporate version, yes. The corporate version was written into this, severing the crown by paperwork. Severing the crown by paperwork and ticking all of the historical documents, ticking this. Now it's been challenged over and over and over again. The courts have no power. The Crown has no power, but for some reason, our Constitution still has prerogative covering clauses that the Australian people cannot change through a Section 128 referendum. The High Court of Australia ruled in the Sue vs Hill case that the United Kingdom, which the King sits in the Parliament as a citizen, right, in the Parliament, the United Kingdom, right, is a foreign entity for the purposes of anything to do with Australian law. Section 44 of the Constitution was the reason that Sue Hill was rejected to be a federal senator, because of having dual citizenship. Couldn't have dual citizenship which swore allegiance to a foreign power, Section 44 of our Constitution, and yet if she had have got past that point, if they had have gone, just renounce that. And then she said, okay, I renounce my British citizenship. And they're like, okay, Section 42 is good. Now, Section 44 is good. Now, come on in. You're a senator now. Under Section 42, we need you to swear an oath of allegiance and fealty to the Queen and her heirs and successors under Schedule 2, I think it is, Schedule 2 or covering Clause 9. I think it might be covering Clause 9, Schedule 2. And imagine the surprise of that senator. They'll be like, hang on, Section 44 just said that I can't be a fucking British
subject and an Australian citizen at the same time for the purposes of being a public officer, a public official. And they're like, yeah, that's right, that's what the court said. Okay, so I got rid of my British subject status to comply with Section 44. And they're like, yep, good job. But now Section 42 is actually saying the Queen of England, the Queen of the United Kingdom, is what it says. And so the Australian Act in the 1973 Royal Styles Entitled severed the Queen of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland to the Queen of Australia. So regardless whether that is a lawful Crown's attachment through the covering clauses of a constitution, we have some issues. We can't touch the covering clauses, but the United Kingdom's Parliament can. That is foreign administration influence that High Court will not accept, apparently. We swear an oath in Section 42 as a senator, as a politician, to the Queen of the United Kingdom that we said is no longer it. So where do we go forward? The Roan Initiative offers a non-sovereign citizen, as they would call it, a non-pseudo-law alternative to say the court recognises it, the nation sees it. We can feel the republic nature of it by definition of the words alone. We've had a crack at it in 1999, but it came directly after that High Court ruling, which meant that there was some power at play. We lost 55 for the monarchy to 45 for the republic, but I bet you that the public debate didn't bring forward the real sort of information of just how fraudulent our natures are. Because who runs the shows? The politicians own the mainstream media, so they get to say only the facts that are suitable about what a republic or what a constitutional monarchy would bring forward. The Constitution's broken. If it's not broken, it's got that many fucking holes in it that allowed us to get to where we are today. Or it was never really truly supported by the real body of the people that fought in the Anzac Wars, because they were there, they were right there when the shit happened in 1919, Treaty of Versailles, 1926 Balfour Declaration. They saw the subject status being removed in 1948, and it happened. There was no rising of the people that came together and put a block on that. That is what the direct democracy model of pillars 3 and 4 in this will do. Citizen-initiated referendums to stop that sort of shit happening. The 1986 Australia Act could potentially have stopped that happening because we would have seen it as a constitutional validity challenge that didn't get the referendum. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles, making it an independent nation, might have been able to have a citizen-led initiative right there to say, hang on, either ratify that into our constitution that we are separate power, removing the covering clauses and therefore the prerogative nature of the Crown's ability through governors and governor-generals to still have private discussions about Australian fucking politics and therefore policies, that little narrow eye, we might have been able to do that. The secondary part of the popular policy of the democratic democracy, I think it's Pillar 4 in the 8 pillars, is talking about 50 or 60,000 votes on a petition. Finally, your petitions that you love so much might have some value. But of those petitions, going to the politicians and physically forcing, because of the constitutional change, physically forcing the act or the bill that they're trying to ram down the throat, the ASIO bill, yanked, because enough people came together and said, we see that bullshit, we want a public debate and we want a public vote on that shit. That's not one that we're giving you the fucking power to represent us for, because it was not part of the discussion that we had when we voted and elected you into Parliament. It wasn't on the table then, it is now. It's a much bigger fucking thing than a handful of wanker politicians like Liberal and Labor in that caucus room get to vote on. So we the people are going to take some interest in that ASIO vote. We the people are going to talk about that digital ID fucking vote. And we the people are going to incorporate a Bill of Rights to stop letting you fuck around and sidestep this so-called powerful constitution under Section 5123A of it that says we can't be medically conscripted, but then can immediately be medically conscripted during the time of COVID. Do you get the feeling that we are still classed as convicts? Well, we act like them. If you don't know who you are and you act like something, then why wouldn't they treat you like that? I mean, the whole point of what I talk about a victim mentality all the time is, guess what you have to do usually to become a victim? Nothing. Guess what you have to do to stay a victim? Also nothing. And boy, oh boy, does that suit most Australians, including all the political talking heads out there of the lobby groups and that sort of shit, is that they need you to stay a victim, and they need you to blame the politicians, and they need you to change the politicians under the victim status so that the perpetrator of the crimes against you is no longer in power over you, and the new perpetrator can come over and be a much kinder person. It's like being in a domestic violence situation and saying, oh, this husband is so much better. My last husband used to punch me with a closed fist. This one only slaps me. And they go, oh, great progress. I mean, yeah, let's justify away, the DV situation. I mean, it is horrendous no matter which way you look at it, and any person that's partaking in it needs to be fucking flogged and jailed. And that's the same as the politicians that are trying to run your life. The Rona Initiative's first thing is to say, let's have a public debate where all of these conversations from all of the movements that are getting more energy now, right? They're getting a lot more airtime about the sovereign citizen movement. It can't be both, right? The sovereign citizen movement is getting a lot more airtime now because they're scared shitless. So they're running hit pieces constantly, and it's failing miserably. You watch it. You can see the evidence now in America starting to come out about the COVID thing. That's adding to the fuel of the fire. You can see the cost of living crisis hitting people in the pockets. We've had a real event, a false flag initiated event, but it was a real killing of people in this country. So that's why they're fueling the brown people bad, white people good argument, right? It doesn't matter which way you look at it. We're at a time now where the people are at least politically, emotionally motivated to look into things that were previously just thrown away as a conspiracy, because they cannot trust the very people, the Liberals and Labours, who have told us, particularly for the last 6 years, that everything is above board, they've never done anything wrong, that the debt is fucking totally normal, and that your cost of living is probably your fault because your baby boomer parents didn't hand down a fucking property to you because they had the ease of all of the things that have been done in the last 50 odd years through this beneficial system. Their own initiative has got multiple things in there that are already in place. Judicial oversight. They've agreed to it, but they just haven't done it. Right? We need to be able to hold these pricks accountable. The High Court currently sits above everything else in this country with the permission of the Prime Minister, because we don't even have a king to parlay to under the 1986 National Australia Act. They severed the Privy Council. The 1942 Statute of Westminster Adoption Act severed any ties to the courts. And somewhere along the line, because of the way that Republic by Stealth was put in place, it has severed the things, if they even exist at any level of any worth, a 1689 Bill of Rights. That's it. That's what we're going to try and claim. A 1297 Magna Carta. That's the only one recognised in Australian law. That's what our big document is. A 1901 Constitution, which may or may not have had a draft version changed at some point, where Western Australia voted like a fucking year afterwards to talk about a federalisation of a document, where 3.7 million people, white people, were listed in the country because the Indigenous weren't even listed in our population back then. So 3.7 million people in the country, 10% of the entire country voted yes, right? Only 30% of the eligible voters voted at all. 370,000 said yes, 250,000 said no to the Constitution after its third go round. Landowners were possibly given more than one vote, up to 6, I think it was, for every colony, or 5, right? Up to that. Women were told to stay home, except in South Australia. Indigenous and any immigrant that was here working, no matter how long they'd been here, that hadn't had full citizenship or nationality or subject status or whatever it was back then, right? They weren't invited to vote. That's the legs that we stand on, that two lawyers, Quick and Grant, went around the country offering a Freemasons Melbourne version of a political document that was going to successfully save the people of this country and solidify it, as an indissoluble federal nation. And it's fucking horseshit, because never ever has it protected us from what has happened, and it's continued to fail us as we've sold off things through the 1973 Lima Declaration, selling off all of our manufacturing overseas. The 1974 Unidroit, tying ourselves up further and further into the UN's control, unable to fully take the whole grasp until something like the Voice legislation gives a treaty, which is the only 3 ways under those doctrines that you could officially take over. The High Court has ruled that the doctrine of discovery was not significant to order terra nullius. That's the Mabo case and the recent native title cases. Right. So what can you do if you don't have terra nullius? You can only have a declaration of peace after war, so a win by war, or a treaty. They don't have those two things, and the Vatican repealed the doctrine of discovery in 2023. So it was like, shit, we don't have the doctrine of discovery with the terra nullius fucking leverage that we had to have this colonised land anymore. We better do something about it. Probably need a voice with a treaty for the First Nations people. These things inside of that Rhone Initiative will tie that up. At the moment, radical title of your land is issued in a trustee system to the state that you are in, and you register a beneficial interest through the Torrens title system, and you are given a piece of paper, a certificate or a digital certificate to show that you have a beneficial interest in your land. Forever, while ever you have that title, you have a beneficial interest, but you are a leasee because you registered it. You bought a registered device that can be taken off you should you stop paying their agreed rates for it. Do you get what I'm saying? This system will lock in that land, that radical title, back into the people of this country. Primarily the people of this country. It will then issue the trust in the same situation, so the Torrens title system, which is fine, can happen, right? We need systems in place so that you don't live on a block of land and build your $800,000 house looking out over your beautiful wonderland, and then some dude buys the block of land next to you and has no rules or regulations, and he puts fucking 14 caravans on there, and they have hippie parties, wild parties or rock and roll parties all day, every day, because we don't have a system of social governance that allows cohesive nature for people to come together and live together. We still need structure. We still need rules, and people that say we don't are fucking mad, because 5 minutes into it, they'll be the first people ringing the police, like certain people did about Pete and Donna the other day once they started talking about the Constitution being void. Regis, Latin for of the king. Yeah, that's right. Regina is not Regina. Regina is the name of the second name of the Queen and the second name of all of them, or something like that. I don't think it's an actual name, isn't it? Regina, Regina, something to do with the same sort of thing. So Elizabeth Regina is how she signs her paperwork. Elizabeth Regina is the given names of the House of Windsor. So we should have been, a long time ago, Jodie of the House of Low. Because that is me living on the land. That is me, the living man. You see people write it all the time now at the top of their Facebook pages. Bill of the House of Buttfuck. I don't know. Excuse me. But this is the way that it would be written, right? So, do you get the feeling that it was still colonised? Yes, the colonisation. I mean, we talk about Stephen Spears' work in his white papers. If you look into if you really research into his stuff, which I did, and I read a lot of it, it talks about the Lieber Code, which is not mentioned in any single political document, nor is it mentioned necessarily as a foundational document. I think it's mentioned as a reference document, the American Lieber Code, out of Lincoln's army, out of Lincoln Civil War Army's manual, right? It is mentioned maybe as a reference document at best, and then it becomes the Hague Convention. So once the Hague Convention comes into play, in 1910 in Australia, 26th of January 1910, as I say all the time, right? 26th of January 1910, we sign up to the international agreement, but the Crown signs on our behalf because we're still subjects of the realm, right? So the Crown signs on our behalf. We probably ratify it into local legislation at a statute level, but certainly not constitutionally. And then Spires' work says that we're a lot of people say we're still a colony because the Constitution was never validated or put in place correctly, which means that it's void ab initio, which is void from the start, which means that we would revert to the colony, which is, I think, the 1867 1867 Colonial Validity Act. I think that most people talk about the 1867 Colonial Validity Act. So we would revert to being a colony and always a colony. But Stephen believes that that we were put under military occupation of usufruct in 1910 through that Hague Convention. But I'm getting out of my league here, but for my memory, I mean, Section 64, it's either 46 or 64, but I think it's Section 64 of the Hague Convention, or it might even be in the Geneva Convention, but I think it's the Hague that says that the military occupying force must inform the civilians of the occupation for the purposes of them basically knowing, don't, fuck around and find out. It then says under Section 40 odd or something that the people, or it might be Section 17 of some, I think it is, Section 17 or Section 40, I'd have to read it again, says that the military force can then force the military occupying force can then force the local law enforcement policy officers to swear fealty to them for the purposes of keeping social cohesion and civil rest, right, civil ease, while they are doing the debt collection of land on war or whatever it is that they're doing. They might only be using you as a forward operating base, your island, while they're fighting the enemy on your behalf and you're just a neutral party, but they will not allow you to be walking around with a spear behind them while they're trying to shoot the enemy. They're like, what the fuck's he doing? Hey, policy officer, your job is to keep this bloke away from me while I'm doing my shit over here. Now, Stephen swears that that's the way that it works, but by their own readings of that document, they instantly don't comply. So you can't say that that document is what caused it to happen and then immediately say that they didn't follow it, because there's no proof or evidence that they did that. Nothing. It acts like it. It looks like it. The same conversation about the land, the living and the dead of the company here, but understanding how that actually actioned out is more likely that if you understand colonial martial law, it is more likely that the Crown, either before or after, because we were still subjects of the Crown, federalised or not, right? We were more likely put under colonial martial law, which didn't and doesn't need the Crown to notify the civilians, because we were subjects. We weren't yet citizens. It meant that we were still part of the team. There's plenty of it, right? And that's why I say we keep going back in history going, oh, it was 1910, it was 1901, oh, no, you don't understand, it's the 1926 Balfour Declaration and all that sort of shit, right? I can play that fucking game all day long, and if I keep studying as long as Stephen Spires, I will fucking shit on him for information, because in 5 years, I'm getting pretty good. In 2 years, I should say, because 2 years ago, I didn't even know we had a constitution. Because I didn't give a fuck about it, because I don't believe in any of this hierarchical bullshit, but I understand that through social cohesion there is a certain amount of things that has to happen. But every time I do anything these days, I'm like, I drive up to a T intersection and I put my blinker on. Blinker, 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 blinker. Why do I put it on? Because I'm fucking trained to put it on. The person that is on a T intersection when I'm hitting like this, right, that person that is travelling that way has right of way over me. Does it need to know where I'm going? No, it fucking doesn't, because it has right of way. The person coming from my right that's coming across me, it doesn't need to know where I'm going, because it can't even see the fucking blinker if I'm on the left-hand side, but it doesn't need to know where I'm going. The person behind me also doesn't need to know where I'm going, because it can either get past me in a turning lane or it's stuck until I turn. So what does it matter whether I'm going left, right, or straight through the intersection? But we are trained constantly to do repetitive things so that if and when we do need to signal to somebody, we won't forget. We are automated, put on point all the time. Follow the line, dot, 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 dot. Oh, line, straight, dot, 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 dot. Constantly every single thing we do requires the ability for you to just comply and do what you're told. So I get why we need this system. I get why internationally it's a lot bigger thing than what it was with a couple of ships floating around with some gold and some fucking salt and sugar. Anybody that says that we just go back to the old common law principles of do no harm does not understand the difference between a runaway horse with a drunk on the back of it running through town and a runaway car running through town with a drunk at the wheel. That is the principle why pre-crime is important. A difference to make the assumption that do no harm, cause no loss is easy to say in principle, but then add alcohol into the situation and a runaway horse might run down a couple, and a runaway car might take out a fucking 100 kids on a field excursion on the side of the road. We need governance of some sort form. We need a commercial way to enact so that we're not carrying gold around all the time, right? We need to realise that if we come together under something like the Roan Initiative, read that fucking document and have a look that we've identified all of the problems with our title situation, with our electoral situation. How are we even going to change the way we vote? Guess who votes under the Hare-Clark method? The ACT. Guess who doesn't vote for it? The rest of the fucking country, except Tasmania. The rest of the country doesn't vote under the Hare-Clark method that stops having to make you try and fight for a 51% majority to win a single person in a single seat. The seat of Flynn requires 51% to take the power off the 49%. It's not strong enough, right? So it actually gets them to a point where multiple seats, multiple districts, where once they reach the quota, right, they'll get a seat, and all of those other preferences feed down to the lower people to raise them up. So more of the lower people that don't necessarily have the primary vote have got a chance. The way you've got it at the moment is that all of your primary votes that go to the lower parties are nothing more, and never have been, other than a promissory note for Gerard Rennick potentially, or the Gap, Cullerton, or any of those people to come to the board of the big boys and say, listen guys, I've got a 4%er here, hey? I've got a 4% ticket here, maybe even a 5 or 6%, depending on who backs me. Can't win a fucking seat, but what I can do is I can leverage this bad boy off against you, right, for some form of benefit, because that's it. Yes, they're trying to win a seat. Yes, they might. But Rennick couldn't even hold his own seat, and yet he's got a political party telling you to give you his 4 or 5% vote. And the best he can do with it is do a deal somewhere behind the scenes to say, if I get in, I'm going to need some help. But if I don't, what will you do for me, for us, for the people with this 4% that I'm going to milk out of the primary? That's the old system. The new system would actually, which is not even fucking new, it's the way the ACT votes, right? That new system would have the Liberal and Labor people in the primaries hit those targets, and then it would actually feed those votes back down. So the Liberal and Labor people would actually be fighting against each other, district versus district, because they could potentially not be preferenced by their own parties if the two people that were Labor side by side in the electorates didn't like each other, or were scared that electorate's Labor Party person would get more votes than them. Think about it. Have a look. And then I would ask you go to every single freedom movement, shit-talking, gatekeeping, Judas goat, freedom, buy me a coffee club waffler, and say, if you don't like this system so much that got the politicians into the power with less than a 33% primary vote in the 2025 election, which allowed him to have a record landslide of 90 plus seats of 151 in the lower house and definitive power in the upper house, then please tell me, why are you saying that the only thing we should be doing about it is either A, putting money into a lobby group to feed it back into the very politicians we say are corrupted in the first place, or B, waiting around until 2028 to try and vote our way out of the problems that we can clearly see are already listed in here? Tell me, please, have you read the Roan Initiative? Have you understood the reform and the change that is comprehensively needed at this moment in time? And also, are you full of shit that you have no comprehension that we cannot fire the liar or get rid of Labor democratically or constitutionally, if that's what you believe in, before the 2028 election, because we do not meet the premises of Section 5, Section 28 and Section 57 of the Constitution that would allow a dissolution or a double dissolution. We don't meet it. In fact, it's worse than that. The Prime Minister now appoints the Governor-General. In 75, when Kerr sacked Whitlam, at least the Prime Minister recommended the Governor-General and then was appointed by the Queen. Same sort of thing, I guess, but at least there was some sort of back and forth before that 1970, before that 1984 letters patent, and that 1986 made sure they separated that. From that day forward, the Prime Minister appoints the Governor-General. So you think that Section 57, I think it was, that was enacted to have the double dissolution that sacked Whitlam because of the supply issue that they were having in the lower house? Right? You think that can be enacted today? It can't. It won't. And if that's what your answer is, you're wrong. And if I'm wrong, tell me. Let's debate it. Come on the show. Let's talk about it. The 8 pillars. Grab that piece of paperwork, grab that PDF and send it out to every wanting to be politician, every person that's going to run, every person telling you to wait, every person saying to vote. Tell them we can't keep voting in a broken system and expect a different result. It didn't work for our parents, it didn't work for our grandparents, and not one person watching this that is alive has ever cast a vote in federal voting. Not one person alive watching this has ever passed a vote in a federal election that didn't end up with Liberal or Labor because of the two-party preferred system. That ought to make your stomach churn. But sure, wait around for 2028 and Pauline Hanson's newfound popularity, brought to you exclusively by the mainstream media, which we trust extensively for what is going to happen. The same mainstream media that put, what's his name? What's the bald-headed dud from Liberals last year? Lead up to that election, Peter Dutton, these same policies were saying Peter Dutton was leading, landsliding. Oh my God, Liberals, Peter Dutton was amazing. Those same pollsters, you remember them? Saying, oh, they were really good. They were also saying, oh my God, the freedom movement was saying, oh my God, all the independents are coming together and all the minor parties are coming together. There's going to be this massive collusion and Rod's coming in with this guy and Michael Hart's coming in with this guy and Rennick's coming in with this guy. And then right before it, they all shit the bed, split their votes into 4 percentages so that they could all make sure they trigger the AEC requirement for a refund of 4% vote. Remember, Rennick put himself on the ticket with Katter so that his 2.8 and Katter's 1.4% vote of the primary came together to give them like 4.1% total so that they could both reap the rewards of getting back your money, their money, paid back to them by the taxpayer. Right? That's what happened. $380,000 went back into Rennick's pocket that he had spent campaigning for the seat that he never got, while he tells you to vote for People's First under the same electoral system that fails him constantly. Don't have a problem with the bloke necessarily, but I do, if I've sent that to him, I watch his little dot mean that he got the message. He never replied yet. Maybe he's busy. I know that he is, but I'll tell you now that if you want support from people that have large leverage, buddy, you better start talking about shit like this and not just saying line up again and just do what we did in 2025, which is fuck all. Nothing. Because you sold your 4% to some Liberal in the background for some deal in the future. That's it. Every single person that voted into that 2.8% vote for you in the primary vote got redistributed by whatever it was that they put down the bottom of their card, possibly something that you told them to do by the tickets. The system can work depending on how powerful the people are of the day. The paperwork means nothing if the people don't collectively come together and hold it strong. We need to move forward. It is 2026. We're a completely different nation than we were in 1970 by population of immigration alone. We are a completely different nation than what we were in 1901, a Christian faith-based nation given to you under an imperial crown of Queen Victoria through letters patent of indissoluble federation. I can't believe I said all that without fucking stammering. We are not an armed force that came together to overthrow the king at Runnymede in 1215's Magna Carta signing. We are not a Civil War-bound country that will get a Declaration of Independence in America through the republic that they became that still has the same fucking problems of, sickness and, $40 trillion worth of debt per capita over there. We don't have much difference. We're not saying that this immediately makes everything better, but it begins to have an analysis that makes people think, right? Yeah, you might have to just break it out a little bit for them, Julie, and just ask them individual questions. Ask them the questions of, any one of them. Rennick, Rod, 3-hour interview with Rod Cullerton where he talked about the seals being corrupted, the writs being corrupted, everything being wrong, the Governor-General not being correct, the letters patents being corrupted. And then I said, what are we going to do about it, Rod? And Rod said, vote for me, I've got good people and good policies. And I was like, mind blown. Smartest bloke we've got on the constitutional front. Rennick is the smartest bloke we've got on the financial front. And the pair of them said, vote for me, I've got good people, good policies. And that's what made me start to go, all right, well, fuck them. I'm going to propose something that's inside the system. It's not pseudo. It's supported at every level by High Court decisions. Every level of this is supported by High Court decisions. Every letter of this is approved. Some of these things inside of here with the judicial oversight body for the High Court, for the Federal Court, a Federal Oversight Committee is approved in 2022 by the politicians. Okay, so everything in here is not pseudo law, and it can't be washed away with conspiracy theory bullshit or sovereign citizen crap. Everything in here comes from their system, but uses it against them. Everything in here will eventually get us to the point where we can flush this out. Everything in here will make that conversation of the remedy groups that talk about the invalidity of the Constitution or the validity of the Constitution public mainstream knowledge. I built it based on 5 years of listening to you fucking people argue about what it is that we need to do while you simultaneously do nothing and your numbers continue to decrease because your inability to show that you are aware that we need to move forward collectively as a people. This is actually more of a spit in the face to the people that continue to tell me that their way is the only way. It is my way to show whether the people that are talking on your behalf out there at the moment truly want change, or they just want a bigger slice of the power because they know the power can't be challenged and you never get held accountable in this system for fucking misusing it. Read that document. It's pretty simple. Go to the ROANR.O.A.N initiative on Facebook, and there is short videos anywhere from 1.5 minute long to 10 minute long, snipped out each section of the 8 pillars, breaking down the current legislation that would need to be changed and the referendum mechanism. The only way to vote out and get a double dissolution before 2028, a double dissolution, is the dissolving of both the upper and lower house, including the 40 federal seats you voted for last year, which are 6-year seats in the federal seat. You know that, right? Of course you do. The 36 seats that went to Liberal and Labor and 3 that went to One Nation last year, the 36-3 deficit that you are already sitting at, talking about how you're going to win the 2028 election and she's going to, in the upper house, pass legislation to change the immigration status when you're already 36-3 down because of the 6-year seats of the 40 out of 76 that you voted for in the 2025 election. You knew that, right? By registered as a politician is committing treason. No, it's not actually, because they changed the oath and they changed the constitution. It's fraud, but you voting is treason by definition of the remedy groups. You electing someone who swears an oath to a foreign official is more treason than the fraud that they commit by sitting in there swearing the wrong oath. So they tell me. That's why we don't partake. Because there's no point doing something the same way and expecting a different result. There's no point, I believe, putting on paper that I agree to this system while it continues to indebt and enslave me. And there's no point, paying any tax towards these things that potentially are getting used for genocide around the world by supporting military occupations of countries that I don't believe we should have anything to do with. But yet they bring their fucking conflicts to our shores and our screens, and now our legislation, ASIO acts and fucking anti-Semitism hate speech fucking acts. What the fuck? 0.4% of the population got to do with a hate speech bill that gets you locked up for fucking 10 years under some form of, domestic terrorism type fucking rules. Madness. All right. Long one, I had to get that out. I've had 4 days laying around on the couch. I didn't know if I had the energy, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to suffer for that for the rest of the day, but I've got to go back to work tomorrow. A lot of that information will still be fruitless to you, but there's plenty of information available about that in all of the remedy groups that I've got all that information from, and I show much respect and love to for the effort that they've put into, but their numbers are dwindling. Their people are getting smashed by the policy officers. They're getting labelled sovereign citizens every time they attend a court, and they are finding out the hard way what happens if you fuck around with the system in its fraudulent, treasonous nature that it is. So collectively as the people, the only power that we have is the people coming together as a people. There are plenty of heads out there talking at the moment that have hundreds of thousands of followers that continue to say that you are a victim and that you don't have to do anything about that. They continue to say, let's just vote our way out of it. You know, vote Pauline Hanson, vote One Nation, vote Liberal, vote, Rennick, vote the Heart Party, vote all those tiny little minorities that do nothing but they can't collectively come together. They just trickle down until, like I said, Liberal or Labor. The Rona Initiative has actual, real, documented, High Court-backed, legislative, constitutional, common law frameworks that will allow you to take these pieces. Now, you might not want to take them all. Sections 3 and 4 are the direct democracy models that come out of Switzerland. That is what Amanda Flavel is talking about. You might only think that that's all you want to do. It'll still require a referendum and it'll still require a national conversation. I want to make sure that we fucking nail all of it with this national conversation, not just fix one little part of it and then whinge that the voting is still in place for the preferential system anyway, right? That's the problem. Then if you don't get the voting people that you want in there, they don't give a shit about the Constitution because we've already proven that the one we've got, they don't give two fucks about. They don't give a fuck about Section 109 with Dr. Beverly Pears challenging about the medical mandates that happened, during COVID under Section 5123A where it says that can't happen. The doctor's Hippocratic Oath from the Nuremberg Convention type stuff was fucking thrown out because they weren't allowed to tell you anything other than get the jab, it's fucking safe and effective, right? So they don't care about Section 109 in the state and the federal thing. They threw that out. Then they don't care about Section 92's ability to travel as a federal citizen of this country, right? Rod proved it. They don't care. They threw it out. You get my drift? They don't even care about the Section 5123A itself on its own because some of the people that have already sued the federal government or the state government and the chief health officers were also thrown out. They lost. Melissa McCann and the likes, right? They don't care because they don't have to, because the people won't come together to say they're going to stand behind something because the people don't understand it. This one, it's pretty easy. What's the problem? What's the system solution? There it is. Will they like it? Fuck no. If they buck, they love the system. If they don't and go, and jump on board or start leaning that way or talk about it or bring some people in with it, then maybe, just maybe, they're worth supporting inside of this toxic system. But I promise you, most of them will say, fuck that. Because they just want a slice of the power and therefore the taxpayers' money to do what they're doing and be refunded for it if they lose by getting 4%. Think about it. And whoever you're watching, you better ask the question, because now that you know what I just said, if you don't, then you are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. Write down the bottom why you don't believe one of the pillars is working. Go to the Rona Initiative and question Section 7. Question Section 6. Let's have a debate, a conversation. Bring your best debater from your team. All right? Not your masturbator, your best debater. Bring your best debater from your team and let's have a debate. Yep. Bring them, have a debate. Don't be like Jackie Dundee and all of her constitutional morons who are not constitutionalists, the monarchists. Don't be like the monarchists that are just sitting over there on their tiny little pages with their insignificant numbers, sledging the fuck out of people and calling them names like the C word because we dared question your most powerful document. Don't be like fucking Stephen Spears sitting out in your fucking little humpy camp out in someone's little tin shed on the side of their property because you can't afford shit while you tell people you're the king of Australia and that we're all fucking peasants because we follow the commercial bullshit and use a fiat currency, and then immediately when you want to go to the High Court to register yourself as Stephen Spires under the dead entity's name and use our money that we donated to you in the fiat currency to put your claim in there about digital ID, don't be a miserable fuck like that, right? Be a real Aussie, know what it is that we want to see from this country and actually start to take the fucking changes. Bring those people that want to debate over and we'll see how they go. Have a good day.